Hello everyone, welcome to another session of AP Human Geography Review with Mr. Elrod. So, hope everybody enjoyed their Labor Day. I would assume that since we're past Labor Day, now everybody has started school. For those of you who don't start until after Labor Day, you're going to be moving a little bit faster through the course, seeing as how the test takes place in May. So best of luck to you. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about a few Unit 2 concepts. Now, Unit 2 is actually Unit 2 typically is the population unit, and what most people do is they break that down to two parts. The first part of population unit is just studying population in general, talking about population numbers, how to calculate population numbers, some of the important statistics to look at when you're discussing population. And one of the primary reasons you do that is because depending on what's happening with the population, there's a lot that's related between population and the development of a country. And so we can look at those population numbers and we can kind of have an idea of what's going on with the development of the country, how wealthy it is, and generally the wealthier, the healthier, and the better the population numbers are. The second part of it is migration and movement of people, and what are the trends there, things along those lines. So today we're going to start off with population numbers. We'll just kind of go through a couple of basic concepts and some important ideas that you need to be familiar with. And if we have any questions, we'll address the questions. If not, that's fine. I'll just go on through some of the material and then we'll call it a day. And then hopefully you guys will have a great rest of the day. So so we'll start off with the first part of the population unit, which is just population numbers. Your teacher will probably should probably go through with you a bunch of the different population statistics that demographers are going to look at. A great website to go to is the Population Reference Bureau. You can also go to the Census Bureau website for the United States, but the Population Reference Bureau has a lot of different charts and graphs and things that you can look at. It looks at global data, and it's really easy to pull from. And a lot of times they'll have some sort of a global synopsis of things that are going on. So that's the Population Reference Bureau, PRB for short. I was mentioning just a second ago statistics that are significant in terms of understanding a country and its level of development. One thing that's a misconception among students is one statistic that we look at oftentimes is what's called crude death rate, or CDR. And you would think that kind of logically that the higher a CDR, the higher a crude death rate, the less developed a country is. But actually what's happening, so obviously, yeah, so the less developed a country, the higher crude death rate is going to be. But what's happened is, as time has gone on, one of the interesting things that's occurring is that actually in healthier, wealthier countries, populations are doing what are called aging, which means that a greater percentage of the population is in the older generations. So, 50 and above, reaching retirement age. Obviously, you're not retiring at 50. Depends on what country you're in. Greece, 55. But, reaching that age. And so what's happening is because it's becoming so heavy on the top end, the older populations, you're actually seeing an increase in the crude death rate in those countries. So even though it would seem kind of logically to us that a higher crude death rate would indicate less development, that's not necessarily always going to be the case. That's one thing to just to consider as you're going through. So one of the important ideas, or some of the important numbers that will be brought up early on in the unit, are the different types of density. You probably might have talked about those in Unit 1, but you have population density, agricultural density, and physiological density. So of those three numbers, really, arithmetic density or population density is the least important. It's the least important because it doesn't really tell us a whole lot about a place except for the number of people that are living there. Some poor countries even have relatively high population densities in certain places. Obviously, a country like Russia is going to be really skewed because it's a large country, but most people live to the west of the Urals. If you look at Egypt, Egypt's population density, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but is it going to be maybe it's going to be a little bit lower, but most of the people are going to be living along the Nile River, and so that's going to give you a misconception of what the country actually looks like. And so population density is one of those numbers that a lot of times we talk about, but isn't going to necessarily tell you a whole lot about the country. So just keep that in mind as you go through. Really, the two important numbers are agricultural density and physiological density. So agricultural density tells us something about the country's level of development, because what agricultural density is the number of farmers per unit of arable land. Arable land meaning land that is farmable. And so with the agricultural density, reason that speaks to us a little bit about development is because, typically speaking, the more developed a country, the fewer numbers of farmers you have per unit of arable land, because in more developed countries you'll need as many farmers because of all of the different technology and machines that are in use in order to do the agricultural work. So generally speaking, in a more developed country, you're going to see lower levels of agricultural density, even though a lot of times they have larger populations to feed, and they might even have more arable land and actually more land under cultivation, because they're able to do more, and they're able to do more efficiently in shorter periods of time. The other one that's important is what's called physiological density. Physiological density is the number of is the population divided by the amount of arable land. So the idea is how much arable land is available to a country to feed its population. That's related to this idea of what's called carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the number of people that an area can support based upon the resources that are available. Obviously, one of the primary resources that's required in order to support a population would be food. And so, obviously fresh water is important as well. But food is really important, and so the idea being that the higher the physiological density, meaning the more people per unit of arable land, typically the more difficult it is for a country to support its population. Now, one thing about carrying capacity that's important to remember is that carrying capacity actually can change over time, and it can change for a variety of reasons. Typically, as a country grows wealthier, the carrying capacity is going to increase because the people have greater financial resources in order to overcome maybe some environmental hurdles or barriers. So whether that's building infrastructure to bring in, or maybe to bring more land under cultivation, or to maybe bring in water from further away, or even to do things like trade and bring food in. So maybe you don't have a lot of arable land, maybe you're like a teeny tiny little country like Liechtenstein in the middle of Europe, and so you'd have to import a lot of food. But again, generally speaking, physiological density, carrying capacity can change over time. If there's a natural disaster, if there's drought for a period of time, any of those things can end up changing the carrying capacity. And so carrying capacity is not a static number. It can go up, it can go down, just depending on the situation. But typically speaking, the higher the physiological density, the lower the carrying capacity. Again, not always, but it might be that way, depending on really the level of development for the country. So those are some important ideas to keep in mind early on. Population numbers, how you calculate those. One of the main conversations in the first section of the unit is going to be population growth, especially in different parts of the world. So understanding this regional conception of where population growth is happening. Actually, there's two issues in the world today as it pertains to population growth. The first issue is a rapid population growth, and the problem with that is that rapid population growth tends to be happening in poorer countries, less developed countries. So obviously the issue with supporting the growing population, not just with jobs, obviously that's an issue, but also with food resources. There tends to be a tremendous amount of instability in those countries because they tend to be poor. And part of the issue is actually that health technology has gotten to the point where it's reaching a lot of those countries where before people who were young and sick weren't able to survive, but because medical technology has reached those poor countries, the younger and the sick are able to survive and actually live longer in life. So that's caused an increase in that population. So again, one of the first issues is rapid population growth and then where it's happening, which tends to be in less developed countries or poorer countries. The second issue is population decline. Population decline is happening in your more developed countries, mainly because people are having fewer children. And maybe one of the review videos later will talk about population pyramids, but in more developed countries, people are having fewer children. And so because they're having fewer children, there's not enough children to replace the older population. And so you actually have a decline in population, which that itself, it creates a problem, mainly because you don't have enough people to replace the elderly population in the workforce. The tax issue, as the younger population gets older, to take jobs, pay taxes to support the older population in their retirement years through government programs. That becomes problematic because there's just not enough to go around, because there's not enough workers at the base of the population. Okay. And so again, two primary issues that we're looking at. Number one, rapid population growth in poor parts of the world. And then number two, population decline in wealthier parts of the world. So both of those are actual issues. And so what's important is that you can understand regionally which parts of the world specifically are going through those changes. And so last unit we went through the whole regionalization process, and so being able to understand regionally throughout the world where those types of events are most likely to happen. So there you go. There's a couple topics just to kind of get started with Unit 2. So looking at population numbers, looking at the idea of population growth, population decline, and then also looking at the idea of the different types of population density. So hope you guys found that helpful. Certainly if you ever have any questions, feel free to shoot those to me. Hope you guys are having a great year. And as always, I hope to see you next time.